From familiar looking battle passes with an eerily similar format, to definitely not elemental sight guiding totally not Sealies to their resting spots. Wuthering Wave has a huge overlap with Genshin mechanics, and that's why today we're going to be explaining Wuthering Waves but using Genshin terms. Let's get started. Obviously this video is not an echo guide, but I'm going to be making one in the future, so if you're looking forward to that, make sure you subscribe. The first and most important place to start, the Gacha system. How else can we start without mentioning the Wuthering Waves equivalent of a Welkin over here? A Lunite subscription gives you two forms of currency, both Lunites, which is the equivalent of a Genesis crystal inside of Genshin, and Astrite, which is the equivalent of Primo Gems within Genshin. Now, Lunites can be used to convert into Astrites, or they can also be used to buy other things inside of the shop, much like Genesis crystals. Astrite, aka Primo Gems, are mainly used to pull inside of limited banners, much like this. The limited banners over here function very similarly to Genshin, where they're going to cost 160 premium currency to actually do a limited pull. There's a pity of about 80, and there's a 50-50 that when you lose, you get a guaranteed limited character as well. As you're doing these pulls, you're going to get currency known as corals, the Genshin equivalent being Stardust or Star Glitter. Now, Stardust, aka the Aftershock coral inside of Wuthering Waves, can give you not only pulls over here, as you can see, the Radiant Tides, the Weapon Banner, and then the Lustrous Tides, which are the standard banner pulls, but it can also give you constellations inside of Wuthering Waves as well, as long as you actually own the unit. Over here, you can see I don't own Gion, so I can't actually buy his wave band, but over here I own Kalcharo, so I can actually buy his. Wave bands in this game being the equivalent of getting constellations inside of Genshin. Now, the Oscillated Coral is the equivalent of Star Glitter. You mainly use these to be able to buy pulls, much like the Lustrous Tides over here, or the limited banner pulls, which I already ended up buying, so you don't see in the shop. Just like in Genshin, you get these gradually as you do pulls, with I believe 3 stars, for example, giving you 15 of the blue ones over here, and I think 4 stars giving you 4 of the purples. The other use for Astrite is going to tie into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is this game's daily energy expenditure. Much like Resin from Genshin, wave plates over here function in a similar way. You can refresh them if you need extra energy. You can either use this with crystal solvents, which are fragile resin equivalents over here, giving you 60 every time you use them. It restores gradually over time, much like in Genshin. Or, as mentioned before, you can refresh them with Astrite to get 60 per 60 Astrite spent. Now, just like Genshin, this is going to go up every single time you end up refreshing, so not exactly advised for free-to-play players. Continuing on the theme of premium adjacent stuff, we also have the Battle Pass over here, which functions very similarly to Genshin's Battle Pass. Now, this thing is actually called Pioneer Podcast, which is frankly a slightly interesting name, but you can see a lot of the ways of actually gaining EXP for the Battle Pass are very similar to Genshin. Activity points are the same as doing your dailies inside of Genshin, so if you do your dailies, you get 100 points of your Battle Pass, much like you would in Genshin. Consuming resin ends up giving you points as well. They have weeklies as well, which involves things such as enhancing your relics, doing some boss domains and whatnot through here. I'm not going to go through every single one. And they also have Battle Pass weapons, much like in Genshin as well. On that note, there are also daily quests over here as well. Now, obviously, every game has daily quests, but these ones are structured fairly similarly to Genshin's, where every single tier ends up giving you some gems and some EXP, as well as other goodies. And they're pretty easy to do. Complete Synthesis once, do some daily quests, you get some extra points there. Absorb an Echo, which is basically killing an overworld mob and claiming it. Not too difficult to stop. We also have the Wuthering Waves equivalent of the Journal. These are called Milestones, and every single time you end up completing all the milestones on a certain page, you get rewards over here, much like you did for the journal entries. These rewards include this game's equivalent of artifacts and echoes, premium currency, database experience, which technically doesn't have an equivalent in Genshin, and then some other nice goodies such as weapon EXP and character EXP. Where we have ley lines inside of Genshin, we have simulation challenges inside of Wuthering Wave. These can give you various things depending on which one you end up challenging. The Resonance Potion over here is essentially character EXP, much like a Hero's Wit would be inside of Genshin. Energy cores are the same as the relic enhancement materials inside of Genshin as well. And then you have shell credits over here, which are the equivalent of Mora inside of Genshin. They're just currency that are used to enhance virtually everything. Many of you have probably heard that relics are very similar to artifacts inside of Genshin. And while that's somewhat true, there's a little bit of explaining that needs to be done. Inside of Wuthering Waves, you have a cost system. As you can see right here, it says cost 10 out of 10. This means that I'm using every single one of the levels that you see over here to max out my relics. The easiest way to compare this to Genshin is to think that certain pieces, such as the 4 over here, the 4 cost, are likely broken pieces inside of Genshin, much like the hat. If I get lucky, the 4 cost over here can have crit rate and crit damage on it, which are the strongest stats I could possibly get as a main stat. What does that sound like? The hat inside of Genshin, the one with the most broken main stat in the game. Now the 3 costs over here, these are pretty equivalent to Sans, where I want to aim for either percent attack or a type of damage depending on whatever my character wants to use. And then the 1 costs, you can consider these much like the worse artifacts, the ones that just have flat attacks on them.
Monkey.
These ones are going to have dumpy rolls such as flat defense, flat attack, percent defense, those kinds of things. So they're pretty simple. Much like in Genshin, you do have set effects, though the set effect works in a somewhat unique way. Every single time you get an echo from absorbing one of them, they come with an element attached to them, or attribute as it's called in Wuthering Waves. As long as you are not overlapping that specific type of character, and you are on the same attributes as whatever the set is, you can get the set effect over here. So you can see I'm 5 out of 5 right now, but these are just random animals that all happen to have Havoc on them. There's not specific sets you need to farm, you just need to farm the attribute, and whatever the main type over here, in the case of Havoc, Crownless, or whatever echo skill I want to use. Much like in Genshin, you end up upgrading these artifacts, or echoes as they're known in Wuthering Waves, and every time you upgrade them a certain amount of levels, in the case of this, 5, you end up getting a new substat unlock. Unlike Genshin, however, you actually have to use a special currency to unlock the substat. So right here you can see I hit level 5, so it says ready to be tuned. But what I don't have unlocked is I haven't used these 10 tuning materials in order to unlock a substat. Now, unlike Genshin, and probably the worst part about farming this game, is the substats are going to be completely random. In Genshin, when you farm a piece and it has those substats, you roll within those substats. In this game, you don't get any substats to roll between. You just roll it every single time you use this tuning material, like I'm about to do right now. If I end up rolling heavy attack damage bonus like I did just there, on a character that can't even use it, now this echo is, frankly, not even that good for me. You know what, maybe it is like Genshin. We can have a absolutely cringe artifact grinding session and get nothing out of it. Isn't that fun? Boy, we love gacha games.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
The one thing that is unlike Genshin, however, is that your echoes actually let you use a skill depending on which one you have out. So for example, I have a rock golem over here on Yang Yang, so I can use this rock golem as an attack. This one's a shielder that ends up pushing mobs into each other and lets me gap close. Baiji is a similar one where I can just use it as a bounce to gap close and do some damage, and then get in to use the skill, for example. Boss challenges are an example of a place where you'd spend your energy that doesn't necessarily have a one-to-one equivalent with Genshin. They're fairly similar to world bosses where you're going to find them in various places on the map, and they're going to vary depending on your elements. They also have ascension materials inside of them, as you can see here. The biggest difference being over here is that when you kill these, you also get specific relics relative to that actual character. In this game, called echoes. So for example, if I kill the Crownless over here, the boss, I have the chance of getting a Crownless Echo, which is one of the relics I need for a lot of my Havoc damage characters. Waypoints from Genshin Impact exist in the form of resonance beacons over here in Wuthering Waves. Much like in Genshin, you just interact with them and now you have a place to teleport to the various parts in the map. They also have the equivalent of statues in this game known as resonance nexuses. These give you vision around an area in which you claim the resonance nexus, and they also heal your team whenever you visit them. If you want to be really brain rot, you can compare these geoformations over here to slimes inside of Genshin. Now you can see the one on the right actually takes damage from me being a fusion character, but the one on the left being fusion itself is completely immune. I mentioned it before, but these butterflies over here are actually the equivalent of Sealies from Genshin. You follow them around, and when you get over to their resting point, you actually get a little bit of a reward. If you find their resting place first, however, you can use Elemental Sight, or Sensor as it's called in this game, to see where they lie. As you can see, it's pointing me right over there where the butterflies are, and you just get them that way. Sonen's caskets in Wuthering Waves are the equivalent of Oculuses inside of Genshin. They're big ticket items that you get while exploring the world, and as you collect more and more, you have the option to redeem them at an NPC. In the case of Sonen's caskets over here, you can actually redeem them over here at Shenpi, where you can get rewards such as asteroids or standard banner pulls, depending on how many you end up giving. Also today I learned you have a weird robot animation when you give it to him. Cool. Your SOL 3 phase over here is essentially the equivalent to a world level inside of Genshin. As you level up your union level, or your adventure rank, like it is in Genshin, you're going to gradually increase your world level. And as such, mobs are going to get harder and you're going to get better rewards too. Also, I mentioned it just now, but the union level is the equivalent of adventure rank inside of Genshin. You'll be able to unlock higher world levels as well, or SOL3 phases as they're called inside of Wuthering Waves, and that'll allow you to get better materials for your characters as well as higher ascension so you can do more damage. Now, let's talk about the skills. The first and most important one, your basic attack. Now obviously, I don't have to explain that one too much. Much like in Genshin, you have different types of basic attacks. You have your standard just left-clicking basic attack, you have your holding basic attack, which in the case of this gun over here, is an aim down mode, similar to the bow in Genshin. You have plunging attacks, or in my case, just an aerial attack that makes me drag down slower. If I switch over to Yang Yang, you can see more of a plunging attack there. Nothing really too out of the ordinary. There is also a special attack you get when you end up dodging a character, and there's not really an equivalent to that in Genshin, so just know that it exists. For every one of these skills you see in here, outside of the Forte circuits, you're going to have some sort of traces that end up boosting your stats. Here you can see one row is arrow and one row is attack, in the case of Yang Yang. This is more similar to the system inside of Star Rail rather than Genshin, as I don't really think Genshin has a stat bonus from their talent page. Your Resonance skill over here is just the same as your skill inside of Genshin. In the case of Yang Yang, it's Budget Venti. Your Forte circuit over here is basically your talent. This is generally a passive buff that ends up buffing your other skills in your kit, that as you end up leveling up, actually increases its bonus effects, unlike these other ones where you only see traces that give you a little bit of extra stats. As you level this one up, it can actually radically change the way you end up playing your character, so do keep that in mind. Next up is the Resonance Liberation, which is the equivalent of your burst inside of Genshin. You can see Yang Yang over here once again has Budget Venti ult. You just summon a giant tornado, and it's on a long cooldown. I have to build up energy again to use. Different characters don't have it tied down much in a very similar fashion to like Genshin. So if one character like Yang Yang uses my ult, I can actually go over here and use my ult on Baiji, assuming I have the energy for it. Intro and outro skills don't have a Genshin equivalent. Basically, all you need to know is that as you are swapping in, you'll generally do an attack on a character, and as you are swapping out, you're generally going to be buffing the next character to come in. In the case of Baiji, for example, when she swaps out to another character, they get healing based on her max HP. Apparently, they also gain all-type damage deepen, but I have no idea what in the hell that even means. Just like you loved constellations inside of Genshin, they're back in this game as well, now known as Resonant Chains. Every time you pull a duplicate of a character, you get a Resonance Chain, much like Genshin. Or pretty much any other gacha game, frankly. As mentioned before, you can buy them in the shop if you have enough of the Stardust equivalents for Wuthering Waves, aka the corals, though unlike Genshin, every single one of these constellation ends up buffing the attacks in some way. In Genshin, I believe the 3 and the 5, or was it 2 and 4? One of the two, ends up only buffing the skill levels. In this game, every single one adds a unique effect to one of your skills. In the case of the 5th Resonance Chain over here, my bullets end up increasing my attack by 30% as I charge them up. The endgame content inside of Wuthering Waves is very similar to the endgame content in Genshin in Spiral Abyss, known as Tower of Adversity. You're going to have to pick out teams very similarly to Spiral Abyss to clear the content, having different sides that different teams have to complete. Now, also much like Spiral Abyss, this is going to end up resetting as well, though as of current, I'm not exactly sure when. Anyway, I hope this was helpful for all the MiHoYo fans starting their Wuthering Waves journey. If you're looking forward to more Wuthering Waves or MiHoYo content, I end up making content for both Star Rail and Wuthering Waves, so make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bro, where the fuck are the butterflies? Bro, where the fuck are the butterflies? Bro, where are the butterflies? Oh. Bro, I can't find a butterfly to use as my example. Bro, where is my butterfly? Brother in Christ, where is me